today we're going to be talking to Jessie Turner, the head of Critical Point Consulting. Say hi, Jessie.
Hi, Michelle. How are you?
Jessie, what would you say would be like the most important lesson to learn before you build out an extraction lab?
The most important lesson to learn is you need to have somebody either on your staff or that you have as a consultant that has prior experience. It's not enough to pick up somebody that's come from another botanical industry. The cannabis and hemp space is unique enough that you need to have somebody that's advising you on the equipment and the build out that's done it before and understands how to get to your finished product and not waste your money. The industry is full of a lot of vendors or companies that'll tell you what you want to hear. And if you don't have somebody, that you're utilizing that's been through that before, you can get yourself in an unfavorable situation and, potentially waste CapEx and time.
So that's a pretty common issue that you see then working with these companies.
Yeah, it's really common, and I think that goes back to the fact that the hemp and cannabis industries are relatively new, and a lot of the even down to the processes, equipment used, it's constantly changing, and so it's not like an established industry where you have like the best practices laid out and you have the standard equipment that everybody uses, and so there's a lot of opportunity there for companies or vendors to come in and say, this is what you need to use, and not a lot of information on the other side to say, well, maybe this isn't the best choice for us.
So with that being a common problem, do you see any other sort of trends in the industry?
On the hemp side, I've seen, the tendency to have these really large grows, lots of biomass, lots of production, big extraction equipment, and then you have a lot of biomass and products sitting around. Whereas on the cannabis THC side, it's a different market where it's a lot more craft oriented, small scale, high quality. A lot of ingenuity in creating new products, new methods to get to different results, and to hit different markets with the products. So from the THC standpoint, I don't see the saturation that I've seen on the CBD side of things. And they're definitely, that's one thing to know, is they're definitely two separate industries in the way that they work, regardless of the fact that you're pulling out and making cannabinoid based medicines or products with it. They're very distinct industries and separate from each other.
Jessie, can you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and how you became an extraction expert?
So I've been in the industry for about the past 6 years. It's been split between the industrial hemp and the cannabis side of things. Had the chance to work with a number of the more high profile companies in the space, and learned a lot about extraction and post processing.
Now that you're sort of off on your own, what are you doing with your consulting? What sort of things do you do for the extraction operations?
Basically, I offer tip to tail consulting advice, anywhere from equipment selection, specific questions with facility build outs, whether it's standard facility or something specific like GMP standards. And then beyond that, I'll go into full equipment lists, picking extraction solvents, distillation equipment, really all the nuts and bolts of getting an extraction lab up and running. Additionally, I'll also offer services such as, if there's a company that isn't happy with the current processes or, their current output, I'll also go in there and assist them in increasing their efficiencies or getting higher purities, whatever it is that they're looking to do. On the extraction and post-processing side, I can assist with that.
So with these different types of companies that you've worked with, Jessie, can you talk about any sort of specific products you were making or sort of what the end product was from the oil that you were extracting?
Specifically, when I've worked on the CBD side, a lot of it is just getting what they would consider like broad spectrum CBD, which is a CBD crude that doesn't have or THC or has low quantities of THC in it below the legal limit. And those will be put into tinctures or capsules. There's not a whole lot of flexibility on that side because of some of the regulations. When you talk about the THC side, that's when, I've had more abilities to, specifically even with CO2 technology, to kind of push the technology and, create new things, whether it's through vape carts or, something else, even just on the method side of things. There's a lot more flexibility on that side.
So Jessie, can you give me sort of like a real world example of what you were talking about, having that flexibility?
Yeah. So one thing that I've worked on in the past is um, looking at material that has contamination. Specifically, in this case, it was a organophosphate pesticide contamination, and what were the possibilities of using CO2 to remediate that, to basically clean it up so that it could then be further extracted. And um, because of the nature of solvent density and being able to modulate that so you pull out different compounds, uh, I was able to create a method that would allow you to pull out the pesticides in a pre-extraction and then go through after that extraction was complete, and you could pull out the cannabinoids after the organophosphate pesticides have been removed. And so that's the kind of thing that really is only capable, that you have the capability to do with CO2 extraction, just because you have the ability to use this wide range of solvent density to target different compounds, or to even avoid pulling out certain compounds. And it's not just a one size fits all type of extraction where you're going to get whatever soluble to come out. With this, you can change what is soluble and what isn't soluble, and that's a big advantage. There was a company that I worked for a couple years back, and one of their facilities in operation out in Washington State was having issues with low throughput using the extractor, the CO2 extractor that they had at the time. And so I went in there and ran basically a method optimization. And at the time, they were running it was a really low density method. And we changed that around and we ran a higher density method that actually still has really, really good quality on the backside. And we were able to increase the throughput just through changing the density. No changes to the hardware. We were able to increase the throughput 4x from where it was before. And so the company was of the mindset that they were going to have to purchase a much larger extractor to meet the goals that they needed. But a simple change in the density was able to get them the throughput that they needed without that, massive CapEx expenditure.
Can you go into sort of how triple fractionation might be another sort of option for companies to maximize the system that they're working with?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the same way that density in your extraction chamber is going to determine the compounds that you pull out or the compounds that you avoid pulling out, you can run a really high density method on the front end, pull out a lot of things that you don't want, and then using your fractionation system on the back end, you have these individual, like I call it, buckets, where you can have density in each one, and the specific density will drop out different compounds. It's like having your cake and eating it too. Usually you have to make the choice between super high throughput or whether you want quality, because if you run a method where you want to really, really target specific compounds, you're probably not going to get as much throughput. But in this case, you can have high throughput and then just rely on your back end system to clean up the oil a bit so that you have your high quality as well.
So does fractionation benefit runtime at all?
Fractionation can definitely benefit runtime, but additionally to that, you can use it to pull out really high quality terpenoid fractions and basically have those isolated from your main cannabinoid fractions, so that you can pull out really pure terpene fractions and then add them back in after. You can also do some novel things with the density where you can get really high THCA fractions depending on what you're doing, or you can even dabble in doing some wax mitigation on the back end. It really, there's so much that you could do with back end fractionation that really it's just kind of scratching the surface.
Obviously, you have experience with our SFE Pro system, and we're doing triple fractionation. Do you think that there's anything out there on the market that can achieve what Greenwell can achieve, whether it's with our system's flow rate or temperature pressure control?
There's a lot, honestly, that goes into building a proper system with, you know, retrograde fractionation, proper flow rate, proper vessel sizes, how much residence time there is. There's so much that goes into it that it's kind of a daunting task for a company looking to get into CO2 extraction to really understand what they're looking for. But from my use of the green mill system, it works fantastic at that. And the retrograde fractionation vessels are properly sized. The flow rate is completely controllable. So you're able to mitigate a lot of the variables that can cause problems as far as trying to get repeatability or trying to get the desired end result that you want. And that's kind of what you see with a lot of other systems is not only are you fighting the inherent variability of your biomass and how much THC or CBD is in there, but now you're fighting your solvent density, you're fighting your flow rate, you're fighting, even like your grind size is causing solvent channeling because of the design of the system. So when it comes to CO2, the key thing on the equipment side is you need something that has reduced the number of variables, and you get that through repeatability and accuracy.
So you talked about repeatability, and I wanted to know a little bit more about how that plays into when you're designing other product lines. Is there a trade-off when you're running your system for crude oil versus terpenes, and does repeatability come into play there as well?
Yeah, I mean, the repeatability is going to come into play in any extraction. The way I look at it is if you can't repeat what you've done, you're going to end up having issues. You're going to end up losing product, and you're going to end up losing money at the end of the day with that product. And so being able to have that repeatability, if you do something novel or if you create a new product and it's well received, or it's an interesting idea and you can't repeat it because your equipment's either malfunctioning or because it's not holding the density you need, or you're just having general issues, it's not really going to be viable. And that's why you need something where all the variables are controlled and you can see all the variables and you can see everything that's happening inside of the system in real time, so that way that you're going to get the same results. So that way if you have a different outcome, that it's probably going to be something with your raw material and not something that had changed during extraction.
All right. Well, Jesse, thank you so much for chatting with me today, and thanks for the insight for sure.
Well, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.